Priya is standing in a departure lounge with a boarding pass in one hand and a duffel bag stuffed with face paint in the other. Flying 11 hours to watch her national team play a single group stage match. Ren is 3 time zones away, sitting in his kitchen, pouring coffee, about to watch the exact same match on a laptop propped against a fruit bowl. Both of them believe they are making the obvious choice. Both of them are partly right. And the part they are each missing will not show up for years, which is exactly why nobody catches it in time. I have spent a strange amount of my adult life tracing where money actually goes after a decision feels good in the moment. And this story is one of the clearest examples I have found of how a single choice, repeated every 4 years, quietly decides what your bank account looks like at 60. Stick around, because the ending is not the one either of them expects. Let's set the stage fairly. Priya and Ren are the same age, live in comparable cities, earn close to the same salary, and each has $11,000 sitting untouched in savings. Neither is reckless. Neither is a genius with money. The only difference is what each of them decides to do with that $11,000 the summer a World Cup lands on their side of the planet. Priya books the flight. Ren opens an investment account. That is the entire fork in the road, and almost nobody realizes how far apart those two paths actually run. The first thing worth understanding is why Priya's decision felt so effortless. And this is where behavioral economics earns its keep. Researchers who study scarcity have found that the mere suggestion something is limited, a countdown, a one-time event, a chance that will not return, activates the same urgency circuitry in the brain that once helped our ancestors decide whether to grab food before a rival tribe did. It is not a character flaw. It is very old wiring being pulled by a very modern lever. Tournament organizers, airlines, and host cities know this, which is why nearly every price you encounter around a global event is not fixed. It is algorithmic, adjusting in real time to how badly people want in. Priya is not choosing freely so much as she is responding to a system engineered around a single insight. That a person who believes an opportunity is disappearing will stop comparing prices and start comparing feelings. But here is what almost nobody budgets for, and it is the part that turns a reasonable plan into a financial hole. The ticket was never the real cost. It was the entry fee to a much longer chain of costs. Flights during a global tournament do not simply rise, they respond to a demand curve that every other fan is climbing at the same moment. Which means Ren could book the same route 8 months earlier for a fraction of what Priya pays scrambling in the final window. Hotels in host cities behave the same way. Economic literature on this pattern, sometimes called event-driven price gouging in tourism research, where a normal room rate can triple or quadruple for the exact dates a global audience descends. Not because anything about the room changed, but because the seller finally has leverage they will never have again. Layer on ground transport, stadium food priced for a captive audience, merchandise, and the small emotional purchases that feel harmless in isolation. And the number that started as a modest ticket price quietly becomes a full financed vacation. And notice the word financed, because that is where the story gets uncomfortable. Most people covering a trip like this are not paying from a comfortable surplus. Sitting untouched. Part comes from savings, part goes on a card, and increasingly part gets split into interest-free sounding installments through buy now, pay later apps that have attached themselves to travel booking sites the same way they attach themselves to sneakers and furniture. Behavioral economists call this phenomenon mental accounting, where money borrowed in small slices feels psychologically lighter than the same amount borrowed as one lump sum, even though the balance owed is identical. The tournament lasts a month. For a card carrying an interest rate north of 20%, the bill can easily outlast the memory of the opening ceremony. Now here is where things get interesting, because Ren's story looks like nothing is happening at all, and that is precisely the point. His $11,000 goes into a broad market index fund, the kind that simply tracks the average return of the largest companies in an economy rather than betting on any single one. There is no ceremony to this. No one asks him about it at a barbecue. For the first year, the balance moves up a little, down a little, the way markets always have, historically averaging somewhere near 10% a year over long stretches, though never in a straight line, and never without stomach-churning dips along the way that test whether an investor actually believes in the plan or was only pretending to. Ren feels the pull too. There is a night during the tournament when the highlights are playing. His group chat is full of photos he was not part of, and his thumb genuinely hovers over a ticket app for the next big event. Discipline is not the absence of that temptation. It is closing the app anyway and going back to doing nothing, which turns out to be one of the hardest and least glamorous skills in personal finance. But this is where most people stop the math, and stopping there is the mistake. Run it out. At a long-run average growth rate, that untouched $11,000 roughly doubles within a decade without Ren adding a single additional dollar, simply because compounding rewards patience more than it rewards effort. Stretch it across 20 years, and the number stops looking modest and starts looking absurd, climbing toward the neighborhood of $70,000 from money that once bought nothing but a plane ticket in someone else's version of the story. And because of World Cup and Olympics, or any major global event returns on a predictable cycle, imagine Priya taking that trip 4 separate times across 2 decades while Ren invests the equivalent amount each cycle instead. By the end, Ren is not sitting on $70,000. He is sitting on something closer to $250,000, purely from redirecting money that would otherwise have funded a series of unforgettable weekends. So does that settle it? Is the responsible choice simply always the right one? The honest answer, and the part most finance content conveniently skips, is no. There is a well-documented body of psychological research showing that money spent on experiences tends to produce more durable happiness than money spent on possessions or even parked in an account. Because experiences become part of a person's identity and story in a way a growing number on a screen never does. Anticipation alone delivers measurable joy for months before the event even happens, something a static investment simply cannot replicate. If Priya brings her daughter to the one World Cup match, she will remember for the rest of her childhood. No index fund on earth pays that particular dividend, and pretending otherwise is its own kind of dishonesty. The real trap was never attending the tournament. The trap is spending money you have not actually priced out because a countdown clock did the thinking for you, and quietly financing a memory instead of choosing to pay for it. The fix is not choosing Ren's life over Priya's or the reverse. It is deciding in advance with a calm head and a real number exactly what the experience is worth, saving toward that number instead of borrowing against a future you have not earned yet, and then letting the rest of the money keep doing the boring, invisible work of compounding. That version of the story exists. It is just far rarer than either the flight or the spreadsheet. And that rarity is exactly why it is worth becoming. So the next time something is marketed to you as once in a lifetime, this weekend only, treat the countdown clock as information rather than a command. It was never placed there to help you decide.